Molweni, Samdonani, goeiemiddag. U is almal hartelijk verwelkom aan hierdie geleentheid vanaand. Dis 'n geleentheid van herinnering, 'n geleentheid waar ons met barmhartigheid gedenk terugkyk, as ook ons koppelig aan die beloftes van 'n verskillende toekoms. Kwamkelekile apha e-University eKapa, endaweni enkwenkwezi. At this point, I want to make a special welcome to a couple of special guests. The VC will also welcome people a little bit later. But Mrs. Nontle Mayosi and Sipho Mayosi, Bongani's mother and older brother, are here, together with many members of the Mayosi family, to Professor Nala Kumalo and the Kumalo family. But a special mention this afternoon is for 4-month-old Reneilwe Mashego. I suspect this is her first academic occasion. The first grandchild in the Mayosi household. Welcome to the trustees of the Bongani Mayosi Foundation, Lwando Bantam, Mlamli Boy, and others that I may not have had their names here who have arrived in the course of the afternoon. But a very special mention to the young recently graduated doctors who have won the Mayosi Academic Leadership Prize. They will be acknowledged later on in the program. I do want to thank you for coming to Mrs. Noria Nomsa Mhlomi, Vuyane Mhlomi's mom, Mrs. Mayosi, who is Bongani's mom, and then Dr. Tembega Mpakuntusi, who is one of our academic colleagues, Professor Ntusi's mom. And then there's a group of people who have come to a research conference, a cardiology conference from all over Africa who are joining us this afternoon. I'm really honored that that your visit coincides with this evening, because I think it begins to reflect the story that this lecture is trying to tell. So welcome to you in a very special way. But then also to all of you who have come to the planning meeting. I said in the week that my mother-in-law used to say that you can do all the planning you like, but if people don't arrive, there is no party. And so this afternoon you've come, and the celebration will be a significant one. But colleagues, we gather here on the slopes of this Table Mountain, recognizing that the First Nations who lived in this area called it the Hurikwacha Mountain, the mountain arising from the sea. And so when I invoke the names that those first people, the Khoisan people, call this area, it is a recognition that in their use of the slopes of this Hurikwacha Mountain, they used it as a ground to collect herbs and plants. They too, as health workers in their varying communities, healing and allowing themselves to survive in hard conditions. And when I say Qamir Orikhais, which is what the First Nations call this area, the place of the stars, it is in recognition of the enlightenment that universities bring. But it is also a recognition of the legacy that histories of individual people bring. But importantly this evening, it is about those who have become a part of our Mayosi, essentially who continue to tell their stories through their work, through the spirit of engagement which they have fostered, and perhaps most importantly, through the people that they have prepared for leadership in the various spaces they occupied. But the question of an eponymous lecture, what does that all mean? And there are lectures across the world which deal with people being invited to give named lectures. There's a lecture given from the BBC in the UK, which speaks to the idea of the advances of science and broadcasting and human rights. The Tanner lectures on human values are held in the States each year, which speak about acquiring human behaviors that ensure a culture of rights and development. At Harvard, there's the Charles Elian Norton lecture, which was issued in honor of somebody who was regarded as probably one of the earlier polymaths, the people who can do so many things, both with their words and with the work that they do. Here at South Africa, of course, we have a lecture to honor Sol Plaatje. Sol Plaatje, perhaps that original of the scholars and linguists in the country who crossed this path of thinking and politics. I sense we often look back to those days and hope for their return. Then at Rhodes, they have a lecture called the Neil Agate Memorial Lecture, which is held at his old school in Grahamstown. And again, Neil Agate, a name that's not often mentioned in the stories that we tell, a UCT medical graduate who went to work for a union and then was one of the very first white people that eventually died in detention. And then who can forget, UKZN has a named lecture for Victoria and Griffiths Mkenge. They have a memorial lecture to honor the contribution that they made as husband and wife at a time where law was an incredibly important instrument in defending our people. So colleagues, friends, this lecture tonight has become a part of the UCT folklore. It's a part of the story that we will tell as a university for generations to come. When we are long gone and there are people who did not know Bongani Mayosi, they will still have this lecture because we located it in the story of an ancient university promising that it will happen for many years to come. But the importance of this lecture, perhaps, this lecture, which happened quite quickly after the death of Professor Bongani Mayosi, calls us to two reflections. What is the meaning of his death? And perhaps in our answering, we recognize our own vulnerabilities and the importance of our various relationships, both in institutions and across institutions, because all of those things add or subtract to our vulnerabilities at various times. But perhaps most importantly for tonight, it is, what is the meaning of this life? And the story of this lecture now will form the thing that we tell our students for all the times in the future. Because in honoring the legend of Professor Bongani Mayosi in this lecture, what we say to the generations who follow us is that this life characterized by vision and was crafted in the growing future generations, it's our call to continual renewal. But in naming this lecture, which now happens as close to the birthday of Professor Mayosi as possible at the beginning of the academic year, UCT has created a spot for us always to remember an African scientist whose pursuit was African science to solve Africa's problems. And in the lectures that we've had leading up to this one, 2020, Jimmy Volman spoke about Mayosi as mentor. In 2021, George Mensah spoke about the idea of working on African soil to address these African problems, to realize a dream that Africa can be more. In 2022, Matshidiso Moeti spoke about the pressure of transformation in the COVID era. And last year, we were honored at the gala dinner when Abdul Karim spoke to us about this idea of work ethic and pride in the things that we do. Tonight, we have a young academic businessman to speak to us on innovation on solid ground. And perhaps that is the moment, isn't it, that we try and shift our gaze a little bit, that perhaps our generation doesn't have the answers. And this may start the process of how we listen to new generations. So welcome, Vuyane Mhlomi, but I'm going to ask the VC to give a formal UCT welcome to you now. Professor Dyer Reddy.
Thank you very much, Lionel. Very warm good evening, everyone. Colleagues, students, alumni, ladies and gentlemen, it is a real pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the University of Cape Town to the 4th Bongani Mayosi Memorial Lecture, co-hosted by the University of Cape Town and the Bongani Mayosi Foundation. I welcome also our guests who are with us online. I believe we have a number of audience members who are with us online. Very pleased that you could join us. And I'd like to extend a particular welcome to members of the Mayosi family, from the most senior to the most junior, and to family members and friends of our speaker tonight, in particular his mother, Dr. Mhlomi's mother, Mrs. Nomsa Mhlomi. Very warm welcome to you, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here this evening to reflect on and to celebrate the life and the legacy of the late Professor Bongani Mayosi, and to promote the values that he embodied in everything that he did. By offering this platform to tonight's speaker, Dr. Vuyane Mhlomi, who shares Professor Mayosi's passion for making quality healthcare accessible to everyone in Africa. Professor Bongani Mayosi used his considerable gifts as a scholar and a researcher to advance African solutions to African problems in the field of medicine. He was a remarkably gifted person, a precociously gifted person. At the age of 15, he earned the highest marks in matric in what was then the rural homeland of Transkei. At the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, he was the first person to graduate with two degrees concurrently, MBChB and Bachelor of Medical Sciences, and both with distinction. After he specialized in cardiology at UCT, he went on with a Nuffield Fellowship to Oxford University, where he completed a Doctor of Philosophy degree in medicine. And Bongani then returned. He returned to South Africa to pursue his career as a clinical scientist and a cardiologist at Groote Schuur Hospital and at UCT. He later became the first Black African head of the Department of Medicine at both institutions. At the time of his death, Bongani was Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences. And as Dean, in that capacity, he was putting into practice the vision of UCT, Vision 2030, unleashing human potential to create a fair and just society. A vision that was very much part of his life in any event. He's remembered as a research giant who made others feel valued, who took others along with him, whether they were patients, students, fellow academics at UCT, here and in other parts of Africa and also across the world. To give an idea of his outstanding achievements and impact, I'll give two examples. So in 2014, Professor Mayosi reported the findings of the world's first large-scale, multi-country study into the effectiveness of steroids in treating tuberculosis pericarditis. The study was conducted by doctors from across Africa who had no previous experience of clinical trials, but who delivered such high-quality results that Professor Mayosi said, and I quote, "We set new standards for global data quality and completeness of follow-up in large African clinical trials, and challenged very much the perception that," again quote, "Africans can't do it," quote. Then in 2018, 50 years after the first successful human heart transplant at UCT, Professor Mayosi's research team, consisting of 3 women, by the way, announced the identification of a heart attack gene that is a major cause of sudden death among young people and also athletes. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's fitting that our keynote speaker this evening is Dr. Vuyane Mhlomi, who, like Professor Mayosi, has an absolute passion for transforming healthcare in South Africa. I thank you all very much for supporting this annual event, which seeks to extend Professor Mayosi's impact on African health sciences among students, among academics, clinicians, but really well beyond our academic and clinical community to broader society. His values live with us and are extended through various measures via the foundation and also through events such as the annual lecture. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
We are going to watch two videos now. One is a message from Dr. Sizwe Ngasana, and the other is a reflection on the legend of Mayosi.
Good evening. My name is Sizwe Ngasana, and I'm the chair of the Bongani Mayosi Foundation. It's a pleasure, in partnership with the UCT, particularly the Health Sciences faculty, to welcome you to this annual Bongani Mayosi Memorial Lecture. This event has become a highlight in the academic calendar, particularly in the medical schools, not just across the country, but across a number of other countries. As the Bongani Mayosi Foundation, we are there to promote and advance the legacy of Professor Bongani Mayosi, and we have a number of programs that we run. Those include the Academic Prize, and the winners of the 2023 Academic Prize are going to be announced later tonight. We also have a program in partnership with UCT where we promote one of the programs that Bongani Mayosi was very passionate about, which is the intercalated program, which includes BMed Science and MMed Science. We also have the academic library at UCT in partnership with the UCT. And in addition to this, Bongani Mayosi was very passionate about mathematics at schools. We have partnered with one of the schools in Delft where we promote the learning and teaching in mathematics, because this is really important, particularly in promoting STEM subjects across all the schools in the country. So it is my pleasure to welcome you to this annual Bongani Mayosi Memorial Lecture, and I'd like to again thank UCT for the partnership that we have, which is very strong. Thank you.
Professor Bongani Mayosi, insightful researcher, clinician, leader, friend, and devoted family man, was born in Mthatha in the Eastern Cape on the 28th of January 1967 and died in Cape Town on the 27th of July 2018. He had the capacity to create the vision of a world of justice and equity far beyond our limited imagination. His immeasurable legacy continues to inspire people throughout the University of Cape Town and across the globe. Professor Mayosi made immense contributions. He transformed the Department of Medicine at UCT to become the largest and leading medicine department on the African continent. He also made it more inclusive, inspiring many young trainees, especially Black students, to become academics. He trained several cardiologists, and other specialists emerged from his department. As a researcher, Professor Mayosi was a global leader in his field and a doyen of heart-muscle disease on the African continent. Professor Mayosi's discovery in 2017 of a new gene that causes sudden death in young people was considered one of the most important medical advances made by a South African scientific team since the first human heart transplant. He was passionate about building a better understanding of cardiovascular disorders of the poor. He deepened the understanding of heart failure and HIV-associated heart disease and gave new prominence to the challenges posed by tuberculosis pericarditis, which is a TB of the outer membranes lining the heart. Following over a decade of research in rheumatic heart disease, Professor Mayosi was at the forefront of bringing global attention to a disease that affects mostly the poor, landing it on the agenda of African institutions, the World Health Organization, the World Heart Federation, and the United Nations. He published over 350 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters during his lifetime, and some have emerged posthumously. Many of his papers have been translated into policy and adopted by global organizations. He also made important contributions to the strengthening of health systems in South Africa and other African countries. A seminal work contributed to a greater understanding of the role of the clinician scientist and the importance of growing this cadre in South Africa. Professor Mayosi's impact on the institutions he led was far-reaching. He won numerous awards and accolades, including the National Order of Mapungubwe Silver in 2009 and an A rating by the National Research Foundation. Professor Mayosi's colleagues say they'll carry his life lessons with them wherever they go. A favorite saying or Bonganiism that they speak of is "lift as you rise." This was his call for colleagues to help build capacity, mentor, and create opportunities for others as they grow and succeed in their fields and studies, thus promoting African excellence. He lived what he preached, and it is no surprise that "Lift as you rise" is a theme underlining initiatives developed to honor and build on his legacy. Our partner host, the Bongani Mayosi Foundation, was established by his family to honor his legacy by fostering the academic, research, and training programs about which he was so passionate. To honor Professor Mayosi's legacy, the University of Cape Town dedicated physical spaces on its Faculty of Health Sciences campus in his memory. The library has been renamed the Bongani Mayosi Health Sciences Library. The passageway alongside the library and the link bridge with Grooteskier Hospital houses a celebratory exhibition of his work and the values that he epitomized and much loved Bonganiisms or sayings. The university also established an annual UCT lecture in his name, an honor bestowed only on an individual of the highest standing, and so institutionalizing the legacy of Professor Mayosi. These UCT annual Bongani Mayosi Memorial Lectures are inspirational and serve as an annual gathering in celebration of African scholarship. They foreground African science and celebrate Africa's scientists and their excellence. They aim to showcase approaches to the needs of Africa that will inspire scholars to realize the dream of finding African responses and solutions to Africa's needs and the social determinants of health.
I want to just at this point acknowledge two former deans of the faculty. Professor Marion Jacobs is here, and Professor Carolyn Williamson, who served as the interim dean for a while in 2019. It's a singular pleasure now for me to invite an individual who's becoming an increasingly influential member of our faculty. Professor Mashiko Sachedi will do the introduction of Dr. Mhlomi now. Professor Sachedi is one of the mentees of the late Professor Mayosi and contributed significantly to her own growth and academic development. But Professor Sachedi occupies the St. Anne's Trust Professor and Chair of Medical Gastroenterology. For those who don't understand the idea of a chair, it is the acknowledgement by the university that they think you know the most of that subject and you can run a unit really well. Mashiko is also the past recipient of the prestigious Oxford Nuffield Scholarship, as well as the Claude Leon Merit Awards. And we invite you, as one of the leading gastroenterologists in the country, to introduce the speaker this evening. Thank you.
Don't believe everything you hear. Thank you, Professor Green Thompson, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is such a thrill and my great privilege this evening, as a member of the organizing committee, but more meaningfully on a personal note, as one of Professor Mayosi's mentees, to introduce another one of his mentees, Dr. Vuyane Mhlomi. It was Ralph Waldo Emerson, an American poet, philosopher, and essayist during the 19th century, who said, and I quote, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." Close quotes. This is how I see Vuyane, as a trailblazer, a disruptor. He's currently the co-founder and CEO of Quro Medical, which is a digital health company that delivers premium healthcare solutions that are accessible and affordable for everyone at home. This is the first of its kind. Lending credence to his recognition as a leader, he is also a trustee of the Bongani Mayosi Foundation, non-executive director at Percept Actuaries, and a part-time faculty member at the Gordon Institute of Business Science, also known as GIBS, at the University of Pretoria. Dr. Mhlomi's meteoric rise is nothing short of inspirational, especially for one so young. He has had an illustrious and impeccable academic career from the time he was in high school through to medical school, bagging numerous distinctions in his preclinical, clinical, and final clinical exams along the way. He completed his medical degree with first-class honors, attaining third position in a class of almost 200 students. To cap it all, as though that wasn't enough, he received an unprecedented 3 of 7 university-wide student leadership awards in his last year at university. This was followed by his internship at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, when he was awarded the Rhodes Scholarship, which allowed him to read for a DPhil in maternal cardiovascular function at Oxford University, which he completed in 2017. I was reminded that quite prophetically, it was while we were both in Oxford that Vuyane told me about his plans not to follow the traditional career of being an academic in a university, but to establish what we now know as Quro. I must admit, I did not quite get it initially, being Bongani's mentee. But I do remember very vividly how clear in his mind and resolute he was about this. To baffle me even further, he said that after his DPhil, he was going to enroll for an MBA at the renowned Saïd Business School at Oxford. At that point, I was convinced that he's completely lost his mind. I mean, who does a DPhil at Oxford and immediately follows that up with an MBA? Sheer madness, I thought. But of course, it seems Vuyane had a clear vision and was mindfully crafting his future. Knowing about Professor Mayosi's legacy and his vision of 1,000 PhDs, as well as the generally traditional route that most of his mentees have taken in academia, you might wonder what he thought about Vuyane's chosen path. Furthermore, since his passing, and you will have seen also in the video, you will no doubt also have been inundated with what we fondly call Bonganisms. That is, inspirational phrases that he frequently uttered, such as lift as you rise or growing our own timber. What we don't speak of, however, are also some of the more usual everyday statements that he made, like, what can I do to support you? And so when Vuyane told Prof. Mayosi of his plans of establishing a home-based hospital for the benefit of those who need it the most vulnerable of communities, Prof. Mayosi simply said, what can I do to support you? And so I know that from one wunderkind to another, he will be looking down on you today, inspired by what you've achieved. And of course, in typical fashion, without skipping a beat, asking, so what's next in Mfundini? You always had to have a plan, the next plan. It was never enough. Dr. Mhlomi is a rare breed of intellect, inordinate talent, and admirable work ethic. This is evidenced by his broad-ranging academic, leadership, and community-based activities in which he participates. He has several peer-reviewed publications, has been invited at various forums as a keynote speaker, and received numerous prestigious awards, such as the top 100 most promising MBA graduates in the world in 2018, and the Mail and Guardian Top 200 Young South Africans Award in 2013, to name but a few. His most recent accolades are the South African Health Excellence Leadership Award and the BHF Titanium Young Achievers Award, both in 2023. These achievements are testament to his recognition as an exciting leader in healthcare and an example to those behind him. South Africa needs talented young people to use whatever skills and talents they have to reach their fullest potential, to find their ikigai in the service of others. And Dr. Mhlomi is a perfect role model. He is our own homegrown boy, born across the way in Khayelitsha. He has demonstrated that no matter the circumstances, with dedication, determination, and sheer obstinance, one can truly achieve greatness. Not success, because success is merely an outcome based on one's own definition. But greatness, which is something entirely different, is bestowed, meaning that it is about how your peers and others define your success. By merging his academic prowess with entrepreneurship and technology for community impact, he has demonstrated the transformative power of innovation, a value at the very heart of Professor Mayosi. I therefore congratulate you, Vuyane, on all that you've achieved and what you continue to do, and I wish you well in your journey. As your big sis, I want you to know that I'm brimming with pride. You have done good, kiddo. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Vuyane Mhlomi to the podium to present the 5th edition of the annual Bongani Mayosi Memorial Lecture.
On the 24th of February, 1988, a woman by the name of Nomsa was rushed to theater. She was in labor, but also severely short of breath. There she delivered a healthy baby boy. On the 13th of March, 1993, Nomsa, the seemingly healthy son, was diagnosed with viral meningitis. 22nd February, 1999, Nomsa loses her husband and the son loses a father. On the 17th of November 2005, on the eve of Nomsa's son's matric exam, Nomsa suffered a stroke. On the 28th of June 2007, Nomsa had undergone open heart surgery. So you see, Nomsa was diagnosed or had developed traumatic heart disease and was also diagnosed with a congenital disease called Lutenbacher syndrome, a complex congenital cardiac disease. On the 29th of September, 2017, Nomsa's son graduated from Oxford. On the 9th of March, 2019, Nomsa's son graduated from Oxford again. Ladies and gentlemen, the woman I'm talking about is my mother. Many of you who are close to us will know how grateful I am for her presence here today. You see, all that is best in me, I owe to her. Thank you, Professor Sicheri, for that wonderful and very kind introduction. To the Mayosi family, Umam Mayosi, the broader Mayosi family, and the new arrival. To Professor Khumalo, Mamundus, you did say I should call you Sistembe because you have your own identity. To the Vice Chancellor, Prof. Diaredi, what a pleasure it was to have my mother's name said by a Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town in my lifetime. Thank you. To the Dean, Professor Lionel Green Thompson, professors, colleagues, friends, and my family, a special mention to my mom once again, welcome. Thank you for the privilege of having been invited to the 2024 annual UCT Bongani Mayosi Memorial Lecture. A big thank you to everyone who has brought this function to fruition. In particular, I'd like to thank the Bongani Mayosi Foundation, the comms and marketing at UCT, Linda Roda and Tembagazi Sonwabe. I promise you won't have to deal with me again after this. And to everyone else who's been involved. A big virtual hug to my brave souls who've enjoyed my constant chatter about Prof. Mayosi and this lecture over the last few weeks. So Lebu Pagamile Kwela, who flew from Johannesburg to join us, Ziko Bali, my co-founder and conspirator, thank you so much for enjoying all that chatter. And thank you very much for being here. And to my friends and family and everyone else who's joining us online, welcome. I can't even begin to describe the anxiety since I agreed to deliver this lecture. You see, Professor Khumalo is a very difficult person to say no to. When she whispered, when she asked, when she told me that I would be delivering this lecture, I had no other option but to agree. So as I stand before you today, I'm humbled and honored to be the youngest speaker to contribute to this esteemed lecture. Although Nikiwe, I must say next month I turn 36, which means I may no longer qualify as a youth in this country. The journey to this moment has been one filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Following the footsteps of academic titans who have agreed, or rather who've graced this platform, is no easy feat. Our inaugural speaker, Professor Jimmy Volmink, the Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences at Stellenbosch University, set a profound precedent with his insightful discourse on mentorship, drawing from the remarkable legacy of Professor Bongani Mayosi. Each year, the bar has been raised. In 2021, we were enlightened by Professor George Mensah, Director at the Center of Translation Research and Implementation Science at the NIH, who celebrated African scholarship in his lecture. 2022 saw Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, who is the World Health Organization Regional Director for Africa, sharing transformative lessons from the life and the work of Professor Bongani Mayosi in the challenging era of COVID-19. And last year, we had the privilege of hearing Professor Abdul Salim Karim, yes, Mama, la tata besimbone TV during COVID, who spoke about Bongani Mayosi's passion, impact, and excellence, and urged us to confront the critical challenges facing our populations and the world with unwavering commitment and excellence. So standing here, I'm acutely aware of the intellectual giants whose paths I follow. Their contributions to academia and our global society are awe-inspiring and serve as a benchmark for scholarly excellence. Their experiences gathered over the years are treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Yet, in the midst of these towering figures, I draw strength and inspiration from a timeless piece of wisdom. The first book of Timothy, chapter 4, verse 12. Don't let anyone think less of you because you are young. Be an example to all in what you say, in how you live your love, your faith, and your purity. These words remind us that age is not a barrier to making a significant impact. Today, I aim to share insights with you not only just as a young entrepreneur and aspiring academic, but as someone who's deeply passionate about the collective journey towards knowledge, understanding, and making meaningful difference in the world. Professor Mayosi's mantras, referred to as Bonganisms, those are the things that he would repeat by what he lived. And I'll reference some of these during the lecture. In an attempt to establish my legitimacy, aka why I belong here, I'd like to reference one of his isms, Bonganisms. Poverty breaks hearts. I was born at GSH Hospital because my mother was a cardiac patient. So I owe my life to this place. I was trained here. I was nurtured here. When my mom suffered a stroke on the eve of my matric exam, she was brought to GSH to receive a life-saving intervention. Later, she was looked after by a team of cardiologists and then operated on by a team of cardiothoracic surgeons. And so you see, I owe my mom's life to this place. Today, she's in the care of one Professor Blanche Kibido, who is gentle, thorough, and I'm honored to have a look after her. Prof. Khumalo, you see, I have a deep understanding of what Professor Mayosi meant when he said, poverty breaks hearts. In the case of my mom, it was literal. You see, Professor Mayosi's work regarding eradicating neglected disease of poverty is not lost to me and family. And therefore his work on rheumatic fever and rheumatic heart disease, including his work on heart failure, are very close to our hearts. Prof. Khumalo, it is my belief that today marks a significant point for the foundation and Professor Bongani Mayosi's legacy. In preparing for this lecture, I was encouraged by the incredible work that the foundation was doing in celebrating the life and the legacy of Professor Mayosi. Moreover, I'm encouraged by the projects that he started that continue to thrive many years later. I'm excited by the progress that his mentors have made. Professor Ntusi has been newly appointed as the new president and CEO of the South African Medical Research Council. Professor Phumla Sinqadi, who's here, is the head of clinical pharmacology. Professor Sicheri is the head of gastroenterology, and Professor Mpiko is here as the head of cardiology. But I also want to highlight a recipient of the Bongani Mayosi Prize in 2021, Dr. Leago Sibesho, who's a junior doctor and aspiring clinician scientist who was awarded the Rhodes Scholarship and will be leaving for Oxford later on this year. So mama vuma xa ndisithi, rather vuma xa umculi uMandisi Dyantyisi esithi. As we reflect on the life and the passing of Professor Mayosi, that today marks an inflection point for all of us. When he sings, he says, asinakudandatheka kuphele, asinakulila kuphele, asinakuqaqanjelwa kuphele. Ndiyakholwa ikhona into enhle ezakwenzeka. Ndiyakholwa. Professor Mayosi's remarkable journey of dreaming big has profoundly inspired many of us to follow suit. My own path to medical school and the University of Cape Town was made possible by a differential admission criteria. These criteria were implemented to counteract the effects of economic, social, and educational disadvantages. Without this policy, my presence here would not have been possible. It's crucial to understand that while talent can emerge from anywhere, opportunities are often unequally distributed due to systemic barriers. To address this inequality, we need policies that dismantle these barriers and widen access. I'm acutely aware that there are numerous talented individuals in places like Khayelitsha who, due to their circumstances of birth, have not had the chance to reach where I am today. So Professor Mayosi, despite facing a world literally designed to keep him down, he achieved remarkable feats. He was an academic par excellence, an outstanding clinician scientist and teacher. This was beautifully captured by Professor Ntusi in his tribute to Professor Mayosi when he said, his professional achievements and accolades are too many to list, but include the Order of Mapungubwe Silver in 2009 and an A rating by the National Research Foundation. He was a member of the Academy of Science of South Africa and a former president in the College of Physicians of South Africa. In 2017, he was elected to the US National Academy of Medicine, arguably one of the highest honors in the fields of health, medicine, which recognizes individuals who have demonstrated outstanding professional achievement and commitment to service. As a clinician, he was second to none. He was loved by his patients who remembered his gentle and impeccable bedside manner. He had a fascination for the understanding of the mechanism of physical science and encyclopedic knowledge of clinical medicine, close quote. When I read this, I was reminded of a tutorial that I got from Professor Bongani Mayosi with some of my colleagues. Prof walked in with his usual walk. People knew that he had a pretty distinct walk, which was exacerbated when, well, it was more pronounced when he was in a rush. And as John T., one of my mentees who's here, would say, Prof always chose to activate his zone 2 of his heart rate. Prof would always say, Mamela? I'm always bewildered by a student who's going to present a case of infective endocarditis, examines this patient thoroughly, and as part of their general examination, they pick up that this patient has got pello. Then when they present, they say this patient does not have features of infective endocarditis. What is pello? I would encourage all of you to read more about Professor Bongani Mayosi in a book and the beautiful work by Dr. Judy Dlamini and Dr. Kopano Matlamabaso, where they talk about his comprehensive life celebrating his work. You see, Professor Bongani Mayosi was not just an amazing academic, he was also a present father. This is by far my favorite quote in the book. One would think that for a man so prolific in his writing, so exceptional in his craft, so exemplary in his discipline and devotion to the study of medicine, that something would give. For many a great man, that something is often his family. And we do not blame them, the Mandelas and the other prominent families. We expect to hear that the children of our heroes had to but accept that their mother or father possessed a once-in-a-lifetime kind of greatness that had to be shared. That the blessing that came with a parent who would change the world would also come with a sacrifice, that his or her time would always have to be divided between them and the needs and the demands of others. I heard of a father who was present, engaged, and even playful. A father who potty trained, checked their pulses from time to time, as a cardiologist would, and determined to be, who didn't mind taking his girls to their hair salon as and when needed. A father was attentive and determined to be at all the special moments, both big and small. A father was home for dinner at 7 p.m., no matter his schedule. But beyond that, I celebrate a man who was not just excellent, but went beyond excellence. With the help of ChatGPT, I Googled and I put in a request for it to search all the things and all the characteristics and qualities that people were mentioning about Prof. Mayosi's tribute. You see, while a lot of people tend to focus on his excellence, what was pretty amazing about the man was his humanity. And if you look at what came up, they speak of his kindness and his compassion, his dedication and his care. It is my hope that as we try to find the new pipeline of Mayosis, as we groom the next professors and leaders of healthcare, that we don't only seek people who are intellectual giants and who are intellectually brilliant, but also people of character, people who are kind, people who are patient, people who know that in order for themselves to exercise their craft, they need others. So this is why it's important for us, even as we talk about the Bongani Mayosi Prize, we don't just look at people who excel academically or who are strong intellectually, but we also talk about people who do some altruistic work. This is a very important anecdote, and you'll understand why before I go into the rest of this lecture. So when I first heard about Professor Bongani Mayosi and what he had achieved and who he was, I wanted to emulate him. You see, he used to say that this thing is formulaic. So I figured that if I had to do what he did, I would probably get to where I am. So looking at Prof. Mayosi, one of the things that was pretty distinct was that he had a special dress code. He had a shirt, he had a tie, and he had that special coat. I figured, as most superheroes would do, is that perhaps most of his power came from this special coat. But I needed more than a single data point. And so when I saw Professor Ndusi wearing this coat, I figured that there must be something special. And so, ladies and gentlemen, as a young third-year medical student, however, Prof. Mayosi was not the only one. Today, I wish to give people their flowers while they're still alive. During my time in medical school, I had many unsung heroes. I know we're here to celebrate the life of Professor Bongani Mayosi, but there have been incredible men and women who've been with me through this journey. And this evening, I wish to highlight them and call them out by name. Professor Marion Jacobs, Professor Gonda Perez, Dr. Neliswa Gogela, Professor Pumla Sinati, Dr. Ayanda Gcelu, Ms. Nonkosi Malala, who sits at student support and couldn't be with us today, Dr. Katie Muri, Dr. Valencia Eagles. In case you think that only women supported me during this journey, I do wish to highlight a few others. Professor Ntobeko Ndusi, Dr. Rino Mura, Dr. Ishmael Bandika, Professor Mpiko Nteche, you said I was an excellent student, and then you deducted 10% because you felt that I wasn't professional because I came late to your tutorials. Now that I don't have a logbook to be signed, I'd like that 10%. Dr. Jocelyn Frank, Dr. Tsepo Mutsoi, Professor Sipho Lamini, Professor Brian Rayner. You see, I'm not the only person that needs and benefited from their support. The network of Bongani Mayosi is growing. And at this point, I'm going to ask you to do something technical as a technical entrepreneur. A vision of the Bongani Mayosi Foundation is for us to grow this network. You see, I benefited from coffee sessions and email introductions, people who were willing to give me the time of day. But the reality is that as the pool of people grow, they don't necessarily have access to the people in this room. And so I want to challenge everyone who've got an iPhone, I hope, or an Android, that's also okay, to take it out and switch on the QR codes. I want to invite you to join the Mayosi Foundation network. By hovering your camera on this QR code, it will take you to a link, which I invite you to connect to. What we hope to do here is to identify students who need mentoring, who need assistance, so that some of you can facilitate those introductions, can sit down with them and offer them counsel, and spread some of that Bongani magic. I'll give you a bit of 5 seconds, and then we'll get into the rest of the lecture. You see, Prof. Chitedi mentioned earlier on that when I Professor Bongani Mayosi visited some of us at Oxford. When he arrived there, he says, Vuyane, head of department. So what's your next funding? What's your next? Because le PhD. Once you get to UCT, we'll protect you, right? I imagine along the way you've gathered some bad habits, so you'll come in a medical officer post, you'll learn. It's not that we don't value the education you have, then we'll get you in your training program, then one day now you become a cardiologist. It was clear during that conversation that I couldn't say no to the man at the time, but I knew I was carrying something that was very different and perhaps didn't align with his vision. Following that, I visited him at his offices in the Dean Suite, where I told him the vision that I had for Quro Medical. And Prof said, what do you need? You see, he's one of the few mentors that does not impose his vision and dream for you. Prof was a clear mentor. He said, my guidance, your dream. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I'm inspired today to share with you a little bit about the dream. And forgive me if I fly through these slides. It's not that I'm in a rush, I'm just a passionate speaker. You see, Professor Tsehe, healthcare is changing. While a lot of people may be frustrated with all the budgetary cuts, with the growing burden of disease, with the doctors that are striking, complaining about unemployment, with nurses that whose numbers are not growing, many people see this as failing. But yet, you see, at the company that I founded with my co-founder Zikopali, we see an opportunity, and we see healthcare as changing. And so we come together in 2018 to establish Quro Medical with a very clear mission, that is to leverage technology and harness the best of our people to improve the well-being of others. You see, we identified a challenge where medical care was increasingly becoming unaffordable, where the average cost for the patient was sitting at about 42,000 rands and rising. There was a growing number of cases that required hospitalization, and the reality is that hospitalization does not happen without any consequences. In fact, some of these have been published. 20% of elderly suffer delirium. 1 in 3 patients will lose a functional status they never regain. 10% will have a hospital-acquired condition or fall. And this is before we've spoken about hotspots, the hospitals being hotspots for antibiotic-resistant infections. And what is most exciting for us is that the global trends are showing that patients' homes are an amazing setting for healthcare delivery. So I gathered the young, diverse, and globally best-in-class team to reimagine healthcare. I've done so with a colleague of mine who's in the room today, Ms. Zikopali, Joost Pilaga, who's from the Netherlands, and a graduate from UCT, Dr. Luke Sampson. McKinsey in 2022 published a study which showed that in the US, by 2025, about $265 billion worth of healthcare services that are usually confined in the in-hospital setting would be moving to the home. For some of you who are business people, this presents an opportunity to develop a solution. But this is after unlocking some significant savings. In South Africa, we are pioneering this by starting in the private sector, and we are proud to have over 85% of medical aids that fully reimburse this solution. You see, we are trying to change the negative narrative around healthcare that is changing, or rather healthcare that is failing to present a positive narrative about healthcare that is changing. You see, the current landscape is one that is hospice-centric with rising costs and lower system qualities. We have high rates of hospital admissions and high rates of hospital readmissions. Once patients are in hospitals, there is duplication of services where you've got different types of specialists seeing the same patients. Post-discharge, there are gaps in care delivery with poor coordination of care amongst clinicians, poor medicine reconciliations, poor patient follow-up, and poor post-discharge monitoring. This has trapped us in a vicious cycle of declining quality of care and increased cost of care. Enter hospital at home. For those of you that like definition, This is an internationally accepted definition which defines hospital at home as a service that provides active treatment of patients by healthcare professionals in their home of a condition that would otherwise require acute in-hospital care for a period of time. And so what we do is that we aggregate a basket of services which we consider to be essential elements of in-hospital care, and we bring them to the patient's home. This means that the patient's treating provider provides virtual clinical oversight through our platforms. Our patients have got monitoring technology, which I'll speak to a bit later, that allows us to monitor them minute by minute, 24/7. All this data is streamed to a 24-hour command center. We do both in-person as well as virtual visits. Medications are delivered and administered in patients' homes. This includes any medications that require intravenous therapy, oxygen therapy, laboratory services, skilled nursing, allied healthcare services, and built into this is a network of emergency medical services providers that enable our rapid response protocols. To further position this and frame this better in your mind, to the left are patients who are very sick. To the right are your common colds and flus. Hospital at home is a solution and alternative to general ward hospitalization and subacute admission. So once again, for the entrepreneurs in the room, we sit within the acute and subacute space, competing with some of the big hospital care providers. As you can imagine, they weren't very happy with us. So patients, after seeing a GP or have gone to the emergency department, once they've been assessed, and a diagnosis and a very clear care plan has been made or referred to us before admission. Alternatively, if a patient's condition requires admission, we shorten their hospital stay by facilitating early hospital discharge. And then lastly, we've got the transitional care program, which looks after patients and aims to reduce readmissions amongst high-risk patients. And so what you can appreciate here is that we actually look after patients who suffer from a wide diverse of acute conditions that many physicians, given the public sector patient, would probably be shaking their heads, saying, no, not this one. But I can assure you that we've looked after patients successfully who've suffered from community-acquired pneumonia, COVID, cellulitis, UTIs, to patients who've got chronic conditions that are frequently exacerbated, post-surgery, dehydration, to name a few. We understand that this is not a solution necessarily for everyone. And so we do have administrative criteria that excludes some of these patients. These include patients who are so critically ill they should be in hospital, who have a concomitant acute illness that requires hospitalization, such as seizures, patients with a marked altered mental status. And then lastly, all we need is a patient who lives in a Quro Medical catchment area, who's stable enough to receive care at home, who needs to be 18 years and above. Pediatricians, there's a solution coming to a city near you, and whose home meets basic amenity requirements, including electricity. People may think that this is a kind of product that is the preserve of the rich and the elite. My mom, who loves her home place in Khayelitsha, is a beneficiary of the solution. So with a recent discharge, we enrolled her into our transitional care program. My incredible team looked after her from the comfort of their own home. Usually they say that you don't back your solution until you can put your mother in it. My mother is with us today. And so how it works is that patients who ordinarily be admitted to hospital can be admitted to hospital. We would then facilitate early discharge and be admitted into our care. Alternatively, the hospital avoidance model, they go straight into hospital at home following a consultation. And then lastly, in the context of medical schemes, they identify patients at high risk of readmission, and then they get channeled to us and they get admitted into our care for a period of 30 days. For those of you who are academics, there's a growing interest about hospital at home. And so this is PubMed, some PubMed public over the past few years, and you can see a lot of people are writing about it. For those who are interested, the scholars to look for: David Levine, Sasha Shepard, Bruce Leff, and very soon, Dr. Vuyane Mhlomi. There's a growing adoption of the hospital at home model, and it's been very exciting to see a lot of the funders who are reimbursing, and we are in conversation with some of the provincial governments to offer this solution to some of the public sector patients. In case you think we are experimenting on our own people, I want you to know that this is an offering whose time has come. In the UK, it is driven by the NHS, and you've got a well-established hospital-at-home society. In the United States, there are growing healthcare systems that are driving the solution. In Australia, this is championed by the national government and the local government. And in India, some of the leading healthcare providers serve around 5 million patients. And it doesn't matter where you read, the reality is that the next decade of healthcare is primed for a seismic disruption by hospital at home. In South Africa, Quro Medical at the moment remains the leading provider. And it hasn't been here because people didn't think that it was possible because of load shedding, the state, of our roads, shrinking inventory on the road. And of course and people didn't think that we could achieve a reinvestment model that would support this solution. But I want to celebrate today that it is happening here. And in the words of Professor Bongani Mayosi, dare to dream. For those of you who are wondering, how on earth are we monitoring these patients? Our patients are monitored using a chest wearable biosensor. It's FDA approved, it's CE marked and registered by the South African Products Regulatory Authority. So we're not talking about big obstructive machines in the patient's homes. We're talking about a Bluetooth-enabled solution that allows us to track multiple parameters from heart rate, respiratory rate, core body temperature, ECGs. We've got complementary technologies that allow us to track oxygen saturation amongst others. Today, we can do blood pressures and glucose from the comfort of home. We know when our patients are lying down, sitting up and standing. We know when our patients fall, and we activate our rapid response protocols. This is not something that is happening in the US, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about something that is happening in our very own soil. Doctors can access their patients' data from anywhere at any time. Jos Pilacher and his team have built a state-of-the-art platform that is disease, wearable, and cloud agnostic. It is robust and scalable, but because we're designing for doctors, it was important that it was simple, intuitive, and elegant. It has multiple layers in which you can see your patients. It's the single source of truth which unlocks efficiency in patient care. This is an example of our dashboard, and many of you who are doctors amongst us will recognize a very familiar vital signs. But most importantly, what we have worked on is the early warning system that at any given time informs us of a patient's risk, and so we can activate our rapid response protocols in the event that a patient deteriorates, and so that the patient can access timely intervention, be it at their home or escalated to hospital. This will not project properly, but believe me when I say that the beauty of this is that because we are monitoring patients minute by minute, continuously, we're able to look at a patient's baseline. And as a result, we can see how they deviate from their baseline. And therefore, their data is personalized. Again, we deal with very busy practitioners, and so we've got guided note-taking to reduce errors. We're able to track our patients' progress using data, and there are ways in which we can gather some additional uploaded information so that no information is lost. I was very frustrated to learn that in 2024, patients still needed to go into their doctor's rooms and hospitals to have a 12-lead ECG done. Today, because of Quro Medical, we do this from the comfort of patients' homes and transmit that information to the treating provider in real time. Patients can log on to our platforms and consult with their doctor on demand or scheduled, all the meanwhile where the patient's information is in sight. All this data is transmitted to a 24-hour command center run by doctors and clinical associates and nurses with their eye on the patients even while they sleep. Some of the patients have often referred to our solution as the guardian angel. One of Professor Bongani's Bonganisms said, "Your work must speak for yourself." So how are we doing? You see, when we launched in 2018, we didn't know we'd succeed, but today we've looked after over 50,000 admissions, patient days, we looked after over 20 different clinical conditions. Patients love what we do. We've we do about 5,000 virtual beds per month, and we reduced the length of stay by 60%. We've introduced a readmission, we've created a favorable reimbursement environment so patients to build an economic model that the public sector can easily plug into. Beyond that, if you want to know that if you compare the average cost of a hospital versus the average cost of a hospital at home, there are significant savings that can be unlocked. So in the province that is currently facing shortages of budget, this is one of the greatest ways to unlock significant value for your patients, improve clinical outcomes, and yet unlock the necessary funding that can be redirected to do some of that work. Beyond that, we've seen some significant drops in the cost associated with radiology, pathology, and provider spend. And of course, as I've mentioned, patients love what we do. But this is not unique to us. If you look at some of the work that is published around the world, some people have shown reductions in readmissions that are sitting in over 38%. They've also reduced length of stay. They have maintained safety and quality. They've reduced the cost of care. Patients and their loved ones are happier, and they have a much better quality of life. These are some of the quotes that come from the people that are most important and central to us. The last one reads, "Thank you for this program. It meant the world to us to have been able to take care of my husband at home." So this is not one of those solutions that are focused around the provider, but it puts the patients at the center of our care. Some exciting developments are seeing moves by Discovery, for example, who have now made hospital at home as a designated service provider for 8 conditions across numerous regions. Recently, GEMS has sent out a publication that talks about their partnering with Quro Medical to provide technology-enabled hospital at home. Beyond that, we partner with some of the NGOs like Operation Healing Hands to decompress some of the busy hospitals and help take patients off the grid. This was one of our patients who needed knee surgery, but the biggest component that was expensive in her care was the cost of hospitalization. And through Quro Medical, we were able to get her off the list and provide her care at home. We are growing and we're expanding across South Africa and very soon beyond the borders of the Republic. You see, I'm working with an amazing team to work together, hopefully with the Bongani Mayosi Foundation and the University of Cape Town and everyone to come together for a healthier continent. When I began this lecture, I started it with a story, and I'd like to conclude with a story, some of you of which may be familiar. A manufacturer of a pencil company, after manufacturing pencils, puts these pencils in front of him, and he says, "Before you go out there into the real world, I want you to learn 5 lessons. Number 1, you cannot become effective as a pencil unless you're in the master's hand. Number 2, you will go through extreme sharpening every now and then, but that is only to make you a better pencil. Number 3, you will notice that I've created you in different shapes and sizes. Some of you are blue, some of you are red, some of you are green, some of you are thicker than others. But what defines you as a pencil is the lead that is inside of you. Number 4, you will notice that I've created you with an eraser on top so that your past mistakes don't hinder your future progress. And number 5, your role as a pencil is to make your mark." Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, you cannot become effective, I believe, and so did Professor Bongani Mayosi, unless you're in the master's hand. In his loss, we've experienced sharpening every now and then. But in the words of Mandisi Jankis, "Asinakudandatheka kuphele, asinakulila kuphele, asinakuqaqanjelwa kuphele, asinakulila kuphele, ndiyakholwa. Ikhona into ezakwenzeka, ikhona into enhle ezakwenzeka. Sakuncunyiswa ngenye imini, ndiyakholwa." Number 4, we're all different. We come in different shapes and sizes. Some of us are tall, some of us are shorter, some of us are bigger than others. But what defines us, as we've seen with Professor Mayosi and his legacy, is his character. And so that for us is something that is important. And lastly, as we move on, we've got a beautiful mind that allows us to hold on to the things we want to hold on to and let go of some of the others. And I do hope as we move on, we hold on to some of the positive memories that we have of Professor Bongani Mayosi. And then lastly, Ladies and gentlemen, our role is to make your mark. And as you make your mark, our hope is that you will lift as you rise. Thank you very much.
Tega kupele sina kulila kupele sina kuqaqanjelwa kupele sina kulila kupele ndiyakholwa ikhona into ehleza kwenzeka ndiyakholwa ikhona into ehleza kwenzeka ngoba sinakudandatheka kuphelea sinakulila kuphele ngathia sinakuqaqanjelwa kuphelea sinakulila kuphelea ikhona into ehleza kwenzeka sakuncunyiswa ngenye imini ikhona into ehleza kwenzeka kholwa nawe kholwa nawe kholwa nawe kholwa ikhona into ehleza kwenzeka
Thanks very much, Vuyane, for that absolutely incredible discussion. What a celebration it has been. So thank you very much for that storytelling. But every now and again when we have these occasions, I'm reminded again, I'm trying not to use the same phrases all the time. But after Vuyane's tribute to his mom at the beginning, to Mama Nomsa, again that idea of Igama Lamakhosikazi Malibongwe comes through. And I want to just say that again because it locates us again in the stories of the women of our world and the contribution that they make. I'm also quite struck, Vuyane, that today you choose to use the reading from Timothy about youth, because today is actually the feast of St. Timothy and Titus. And the story today is about you're not made for cowardice. And thank you for taking up the cudgels on behalf of the young people. But colleagues, I think today has been an incredible convergence of this idea of academic acumen on the one hand, and this idea of entrepreneurship on the other. And it's a constant tension we have, don't we, in the health professions, of how we value entrepreneurship in the stories that we tell as health professionals. So thank you for giving that life and bringing it amongst us. Let me go straight on to the remaining part of the program. I want to invite Advocate Bongani Mayosi, who is a family member of the Mayosi family. He's a UCT alumnus who graduated from the Crown School of Law here in 2008. He is practicing law here in Cape Town as a member of the Cape Bar and serves as a trustee of the Bongani Mayosi Foundation. I invite you, Advocate Bongani Mayosi, to announce and to award the Special Bongani Mayosi National Student Awards, which, as Vuyane was referring to, are awards elected by the final year students. Perhaps you're going to do that. You're going to do that detail. Can I invite Vuyane just to come through and help with the awarding of the certificates?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, and to individuals who joined us online. It's an honor and privilege to be here today to present the Bongani Mayosi Medical Students Academic Prize on behalf of the Bongani Mayosi Foundation. Just for some context into this award, the Bongani Mayosi National Medical Students Prize is a national prize aimed at recognizing final year medical students who epitomize and share similar traits to that of our Bongani. So what then happens is that final year students nationally all vote for a member in their class who at least has one or at least three of these traits: that they are academic achievers, that they have emotional intelligence and good interpersonal skills, and they are socially responsible and responsiveness in that they are aware of others and assist others in need. So this award, in essence, is a recognition by your fellow classmates of how and they see you, how they feel about you, and in essence, it keeps the legacy of Bongani going in the traits that we've just referred to. The award is democratic, so the person who gets the most votes in each faculty is the one awarded with the award. But in any event, the prize recognizes what Mashiko has referred to earlier, greatness instead of success, particularly for medical students who are already at some level of success in their final year. So without further ado, I will now announce the winners of the 2023 Bongani Mayosi Medical Students Prize in no particular order. First is Dr. Cooper from the Sefako Makgato University. Second is Dr. Kanyile from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Third is Dr. Maruma from the University of Limpopo. Fourth is Dr. Shirinza from the University of Cape Town. 5th is Dr. Pillay from the University of Witwatersrand. Sixth is Dr. Kobotwana from the Walter Sisulu University. Seven is Dr. Ravuti from the Stellenbosch University. The eighth is Dr. Ross from the University of Pretoria. Thank you, and those are the recipients of the 2003 Dr. Bongani Mayosi Medical Students Prize. Thank you, everyone.
I think it's going to be an incredible celebration this evening, and so it remains for me to invite, let me just apologize for the VC. His grandchild was born this morning and he hasn't seen the child yet, so he had to leave and ask for me to give his apologies. I'm amazed that he stayed as long as he did. So let me invite Dr. Liago Sebesho to give the vote of thanks. As you heard from Vuyane earlier, Dr. Sebesho was a student leader, in fact, of the group when I arrived here. So yeah, I was very glad that there were student leaders such as her when we landed in the COVID pandemic, because they were very instrumental in helping us manage that. Liago is also a winner of the Mayosi Student Leader Award, having been elected by her peers in that year. But as you've heard, the new achievement is that she's a Rhodes Scholar about to travel to Oxford. Liago.
Good evening to the Mayosi and Khumalo families. In absentia, Interim Vice Chancellor Professor Diaredi, Dean of the Faculty, Professor Lionel Green-Thompson, esteemed faculty and university leadership, and all friends and family gathered here. As an alumnus of this faculty and a recipient of the Bongani Mayosi Student Academic Prize, it's a great honor for me to stand in this room this evening. And as we approach the end of this auspicious event, I am just grateful and appreciative of the evening that's been pulled off. For me, much like Vuyane, this represents a full circle moment for me. As mentioned by the Dean, I was a student of this faculty during the deanship of Prof. Mayosi, as well as being on student council the year that he passed. And events like this are a profound reminder that mourning and grief can be turned into something profoundly beautiful. So on behalf of the Bongani Mayosi Foundation, as well as the University of Cape Town, it is my honor to offer the vote of thanks this evening. There are many individuals deserving of our gratitude, integral to this event, as well as integral to the work of the foundation at large. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Mayosi and Khumalo families. You have been pivotal in keeping the Mayosi name alive. Thank you for sharing him with us. And it's evident that the love that exists in the family is a love that transcends generations. Thank you for inspiring us, and we continue to do the work that lived in his heart. I also wish to express thank you to the University of Cape Town for its unwavering support of the foundation. Thank you to the VC for joining us this evening, as well as the Dean of the Faculty of the Health Sciences at UCT. The dedication of both the foundation and the faculty is integral and what makes events like this possible. I also want to extend gratitude to the Mayosi Organizing Committee, which comprises of members of both faculty and the foundation, and the collaboration behind the scenes was integral in pulling off the successful event. I'd like to, in absentia, also thank the chair of the Bongani Mayosi Foundation, Mr. Sizwe Ngasana, as well as the trustees which are present this evening. Your efforts the past few years have built an incredible foundation. As a beneficiary of the award, I can attest to its profound impact on past winners. Prof. Mayosi was an advocate of leadership, advocate of mentorship, advocate for excellence. So, for example, one of the events that the foundation had done for us as previous winners is that we had an alumni event in Johannesburg, and we had incredible feedback from the past winners from that event. And one of the takeaways that I got from the event was that we need to start fostering the idea of horizontal mentorship. So usually when we think about mentorship, we think about this vertical process where somebody who's more esteemed as you, who's achieved more than you, and is where you'd like to be is the person that mentors you. But at that event, we were introduced to the idea of peer-to-peer mentorship, where people who are going through similar challenges as you are able to give perspective in a way where you didn't think about the same issue. So there we were as young clinicians supporting us through the challenges of the profession and moving away from the narrative of working in silos and working in isolation. And of course, that would not be possible without the help of stakeholders. So I would like to thank Mr. Aaron Steenkamp, Head of Acquisitions at Standard Bank, for pulling off that event for us, as well as Ms. Kanyisa Vokwana and Ngobile Sibindi for hosting us at that Johannesburg event. I'm also deeply grateful to Mr. Gareth Harvey, National Banking Segment Head at Investec. They have graciously agreed to host the winners of the Bongani Mayosi Academic Prize, yes, that's you guys, at a networking session with esteemed senior academics as well as health entrepreneurs tomorrow. So in advance, we're also thankful for your future funding and donorship. As we build this foundation and create mentorship circles and a hub of networking. I would also like to thank Prof. Sichedi, who gave us that incredible welcome of Dr. Vuyane Mhlomi. I actually thought that was the lecture. That's how powerful it was. And to our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Mhlomi, your address today resonated deeply with all of us, echoing Prof. Mayosi's own approach to life and work. He was known for his kindness and his demeanor, this gentle demeanor. But every single time you'd be in his presence, you had this aggravating feeling of, I need to be excellent all the time. I still remember the days of student council where we'd have these weekly checkup meetings, and sometimes there was no agenda, but we'd sit in a meeting being like, guys, we're meeting with Prof. Mayosi, there must be an agenda. Because he's gonna ask us, guys, what's the agenda? So he had that way of igniting that in us. And in a similar vein today, your speech stirred a renewed commitment to excellence in a lot of us. You were able to connect with your audience in a simple way, where you made complex ideas very simple for us to understand. And that also reflects the true nature of Prof. Mayosi. I think also your message goes beyond words. It was a call to action, reminding us, some of us, that the health system isn't failing, it's changing. The importance of mentorship, the importance of perseverance, and the need for continuous learning and growth. Like Prof. Mayosi, you have demonstrated a profound understanding of the challenges and opportunities within the field of health sciences. And like you said, in quoting Mandisi, and on behalf of everyone here and the wider community that will benefit from your wisdom, Dr. Mhlomi, and your invaluable contribution to this lecture, we thank you. I feel like you're at the pinnacle of your career, but I want to pull a Mayosi on you and ask you, Fondine, what's next? We also extend our deepest gratitude to the participating universities that were named by Advocate Mayosi. It is a process that they facilitate, and they allow the very innovative selective process where it is a peer nomination and a peer voting system, and their contribution and their allowing us to facilitate those in those universities keeps the student prize alive. I would also like to thank everybody who's been here this evening. Your presence here is a testament to the nature and enduring impact of Prof. Mayosi's legacy. We're thankful for your support and for the honor you bring to this event. And as we conclude and carry the message forward, I hope that our tears may dry, I hope that our hearts may heal, and I hope that we may carry on his legacy, not only in our lives, our families, but in our communities. Thank you for joining us for this meaningful celebration.
Colleagues, it's been an incredible evening. I do want to single out again, as Vuyane did in his talk, Linda Rhoda and Tembagazi Sonwaba. I think that the work... I don't see them though. There's Linda and Tembagazi. Just stand so that people can see you. Just celebrate. And Rebecca is somewhere as well. And I'm acknowledging them especially because tomorrow morning we welcome first years onto our campus for the first time with their parents, and they'll be back sorting out the logistics around that event. But again, I think it is an important thing that this happens on the eve of the coming of the next generation of health professionals. So thank you for joining us. Please join us downstairs for some refreshments at the end of a really spectacular evening. Thank you again.